The man suspected of attempting to assassinate President Trump at his West Palm Beach golf course last year now faces state charges in Florida. That's in addition to the federal charges that Ryan Routh already faced. Florida's Attorney General James Uthmeier posting a video on social media earlier on today explaining that his office secured a warrant and is charging Routh with attempted first-degree murder and terrorism in the plot to kill Donald Trump, who at the time was the Republican frontrunner for president. You can see this post here coming in from the Attorney General there of the state of Florida. This is again James Uthmeier. He said, "Today my office is officially charging Ryan Routh for attempting to assassinate then presidential candidate Donald J. Trump." As you can see, there is a statement with this, so I do want to pop up the audio so we can listen in.
I'm Attorney General James Uthmeier. On September 15th, 2024, Ryan Routh attempted to assassinate then presidential candidate Donald J. Trump at the Trump International Golf Club in West Palm Beach. Shortly after the assassination attempt, Governor DeSantis signed an executive order directing the Office of Attorney General to work with our law enforcement partners and investigate Mr. Routh. After 206 days of stonewalling by the federal government that stemmed from days of the Biden administration, I'm able to now announce that my office is charging Mr. Routh for the attempted first-degree murder of President Trump, as well as a charge for terrorism. My office, as well as our law enforcement partners, were met with major roadblocks in prosecuting this case during Biden's term. Biden and his attorney general sought to frustrate our efforts and block our investigation into the man who crossed into this state and attempted to commit political violence against a Florida resident. Thank God he was unsuccessful, and thank God we have Donald Trump as president again. The leadership of U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel was instrumental in preserving Florida's sovereign authority to do what is right and bring justice where it is due. We now have a federal government willing to work together to pursue justice. Attempting to take the life of a former president and a leading presidential candidate isn't just an attack on one man. This was a political attack against our Republican form of government and our shared American values. We cannot allow justice to be delayed or denied, and thanks to the President, our U.S. Attorney General, and the FBI Director, we are moving forward in our pursuit. Our statewide prosecutors will work to hold this evil man accountable and keep Florida safe, strong, and free.
All right, that was Florida Attorney General James Uthmeier, and all of this comes just days after federal prosecutors revealed the allegations that Routh sought to obtain military-grade weapons, including a rocket launcher from a Ukrainian contact, as part of that alleged plot. Court documents obtained by Fox News allege Routh told his associate to, quote, "Send me a RPG, which is a rocket-propelled grenade or stinger, and I will see what I can do." Those documents go on to say the pair discussed Routh's purchase options, with Routh asking if the associate could, quote, "ship it to me," before explaining, quote, "I need equipment so that Trump cannot get elected." A lot to discuss here, so I do want to bring in Andrew Cherkasky, a criminal defense attorney and former federal prosecutor. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to join us here.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be with you.
All right, so first off, I do want to ask you about the overall situation here and those charges that have been filed there, state charges. Can you break down those charges for me?
Well, what we're really seeing here is some forward progress combined with some transparency about what was going on back in September and in the following months while President Biden was still in office, and the DOJ at the time seemed almost entirely silent on the issue. Now we have the federal government bringing charges against him. That has been going on, but Florida has now said that they too will bring charges, specifically the most serious of which is a first degree murder or attempted murder charge, and the evidence against him is overwhelming. There's been rumors or whisperings that he might try for an insanity defense or something of that sort. I think that the actions of what he engaged in that day demonstrate clear planning, clear intent, a clear knowledge that he had done something to run from authorities. So I don't see any insanity defense, and I think that the cards are stacked against him here.
When you talk about federal charges and state charges, is that fairly standard to see that happen, to have both kind of side by side?
It is in a case of this magnitude. We see it right now in New York with the case of Luigi Mangione, who's being charged both by the feds and the state. A lot of time people think of it like a double jeopardy question. We all think constitutionally double jeopardy is not permitted, but we don't usually think of the fact that jeopardy is only by the actual sovereign that is prosecuting. So the federal government is different from state governments. And so you can have prosecutions in both forums for effectively the same crimes, the same acts.
The state charges obviously coming a while after the incident. You kind of touched on this, but is that unusual to see as months and months pass? Because we're talking April 10th here of 2025, and the alleged crime happened back in September of 2024.
I think that the factor that we can likely point to as the most reasonable explanation for why perhaps it took Florida this long is because I think that there was serious concerns and serious guards against the data and information that the feds had and how they were sharing it with Florida. Now we hear, as they've come forward this week to say that they're bringing these charges, that there's great cooperation and transparency between the feds and the state prosecutors here, which is, I think, very important in a case like this. But it felt like prior to the Trump administration really taking the reins on this case, that there were communication issues and that there were problems with that sharing of evidence. And that's something that I think is probably attributed to politics. And sometimes it's just kind of everybody wants their own turf and wants to make sure that evidence isn't I guess, jeopardized in the process. But this signals very clearly that the Trump administration, the Trump DOJ, and the state of Florida are all working in concert on this to make sure that each have the access they need to the relevant evidence and to be able to prove their own case.
Any difference when you're talking about a former president versus current president as far as the legal aspects here? Because, again, it's important to note when this happened, now President Trump was former President Trump. He was the Republican frontrunner running for president. Does that change anything as you look at the legal process?
It doesn't particularly, although the thing that keeps standing out to me is, will Donald Trump have to be a witness in either of these trials? He didn't really know what was going on. He only knew that there was some sort of aftermath when they were rushing him away and protecting him from the efforts to capture this person. So I don't know that he has any particular information that would help, but a sitting president having to go testify in a criminal trial is something that's unprecedented, at least as far as I can think of in modern history. And I don't think that it's ever happened. I take that back. It may have happened hundreds of years ago with earlier presidents, but the idea of President Trump having to sit as a witness in trial is the thing that I keep thinking about, having a sitting president go in there. But besides that point, whether it was because he was a candidate, a former president, or actually the active president, the idea of an assassination attempt really is just a murder attempt, and the extra pieces there are all the same, whichever one of those statuses he was in.
Where do we go from here? What's next in the entire legal process as all of this does kind of play out over, I imagine, the next several months, possibly, of course, even years?
Well, there's been a discussion over the last few months about the defense playing their cards very close. Some may even say that they have been less than forthcoming. And I say that because there was, again, some mention a while ago that they may go for an insanity defense, but that notice from them came much later than expected. Usually you lay the groundwork for that really from the very beginning. And so I wonder if they're going to try to ultimately pull some sort of insanity angle on this. I already told you that I don't think that there's any sort of indication that they'd be able to do that based on all of the evidence about what he was doing before, during, and after, showing real intent, real knowledge of the criminality and wrongfulness of his conduct. I think the defense has to find some way to try to mitigate their case. I would assume that they're trying to save him from a life without the possibility of parole sentence, since the assassination didn't happen, the death penalty is not on the table, but the idea of putting him away for life without the possibility of getting out, I think is a real likelihood here. But perhaps they will be able to not defend him entirely with an insanity defense, but perhaps point to some sort of greater mental health issues or struggles or some sort of outside or external forces that were weighing on him that kind of caused him to do this. And that may ultimately reduce this from kind of that life without the possibility of parole to something less. Obviously, he still has yet to stand trial. He's presumed innocent, but the evidence is not looking favorable.
All right, Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time, as always, to join us and help discuss this further. Anything you want to add, anything I missed before I let you go?
Well, I think we need to be very mindful of the sharing of information from the federal government, specifically the DOJ, to the public of matters like this of national concern. Of course, there was the assassination attempt in Pennsylvania that I know many people in this country want to hear so much more about, and what all of the connections and links are, how the Secret Service responded to it. And I think that the Trump administration is doing something that no modern presidency has done, and that's acting with just the highest degree of transparency I think we've ever seen, again, in modern history. And so I really hope that we continue to have really wonderful transparency, and I have no doubt the Trump administration is going to keep doing that because they've been doing it. And it was a campaign promise, and it seems to be something on the top of Attorney General Pam Bondi's mind. So this is good for us in the media. It's good for us in the public to really know what's happening behind the scenes.
All right, Andrew Cherkasky, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And Dana Marie McNichol has been following all of the latest. She has more about the court documents itself and the new charges right here on Live Now from Fox.
Josh, in an exclusive interview with Florida Attorney General James Uthmeier, he says the charges of attempted murder and terrorism were a long time coming. He says that Florida's investigation was delayed over 200 days because of what he described as stonewalling by the Biden administration. Uthmeier says Florida law enforcement had trouble accessing the crime scene, and the Attorney General's office was met with major roadblocks in trying to prosecute this case.
We want a justice system that is willing to pursue justice no matter what party is in charge. And Joe Biden and the Democrats did everything they could to drag their feet and refuse to cooperate with the state of Florida. Under Attorney General Bondi and the Trump administration and our new FBI director, it's been a breath of fresh air, very different. They've been transparent, cooperative.
Uthmeier says this will be a collaborative investigation. The federal government has made their evidentiary folder available to his office, and they plan to do the same. He also mentioned that more evidence about this case will become public shortly. Routh is already facing a state charge for attempted felony murder related to a traffic incident that injured a 6-year-old little girl after he fled the scene at Trump International Golf Club. Uthmeier did confirm that case is still ongoing. The federal charges against Ryan Routh will take priority. The state of Florida will have to wait for that trial to end, which is scheduled to start this September. Josh.
All right, Dana Marie, thank you so much for that report.